Councilman John Dunleavy. And we have Challenger Millie Thomas. Councilwoman Jody Giglio. Challenger Bill Bianchi. All right, good evening and welcome to the Riverhead Town Board debates for the 2013 general election. I'm Michael White of the Riverhead News Review, and this is Denise Civiletti, publisher of Riverhead Local. Quick sort of ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question, with time allotted also for a rebuttal. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to make a final statement. There are no opening statements. Thank you for being here, and please hold your applause to the end. And thanks for attending, and let's get started.
Okay, the first question is for Councilman John Dunleavy. Councilman Dunleavy, looking back, do you think it was a mistake to allow the clear cutting of the entire 42-acre Shops at Riverhead site where Costco is being built? Why or why not? And please be specific.
Okay, well, we could have handled it differently. I did not know they were going to clear cut the whole shopping center. I think we could have thought a little bit more into it. Looked what the planning board did. And I have to apologize to some of the people at Foxwood for what I've stated. It's no one's to blame. It's just that things happen. Now we have a berm. The berm at the bottom is about 45 foot to the top, and they're going to start planting evergreens on top of that next week. So we should be moving along.
Okay.
All right, next question is for Millie Thomas. Ms. Thomas, you've been so quiet this election season, especially considering you were nominated back in May and didn't face a primary. A lot of people have commented that they don't really know what you stand for. What are the 5 most compelling reasons people should vote for you on November 5th?
Well, I'm not a politician, but I am a business person, and I run a real estate office in Wading River. It's called Landmark Realty, and as most of you know, the housing market took a really big nosedive, and I was able to pull my office out of that, and we were in crisis mode. So I think that the town of Riverhead is in crisis right now also. There's a lot of issues. We've made some progress, but there's a lot of problems. And I'm ready for the challenge. And as a business person, also what I've done recently, I'm very proud to say that this year we are in the top 10% in all of Suffolk County in sales for real estate. And we have handled $27 million worth of sales, and that came from 6 years of total doldrums with nothing happening. So it took good leadership, good management. I had to really do something with my budget, and we were able to keep my 38 people that work for me are all still working, and they're making money for their families. I do want to help the town of Riverhead. I've been a volunteer in Wading River for a very long time, and I would like to see Riverhead be a better and safer place.
Can I say something?
30 seconds.
Okay. I know she said that Riverhead is in a crisis mode. I would like her to explain what she would do if she thinks Riverhead is in a crisis mode now, how she would fix the problem that she thinks Riverhead has, which I don't think we have a problem. I think we're doing very fine in the town, this great town of Riverhead.
Just now, if you had 40 seconds left, if you wanted to continue or not.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, Riverhead is broke. So we have budget problems, and EPCAL, we're making some progress. I think it's a good idea that we separated EPCAL into 50 different different units that could be sold. However, there's infrastructure problems there. I think we need to reach out to whoever we can for grants. We need to bring in some revenue. It's been about 20 years that we've owned this property, and the reason why we had this property was to bring more jobs and bring more revenue into Riverhead, and I don't see that happening until possibly now, but it's gonna take a long time to straighten everything out. We have also infrastructure problems with our town, with the sewage system and all, and we have safety issues. We absolutely have safety issues. So these are some of the problems that we need to address.
We are the first, we are the
We got
first.
plenty of time, we got plenty of
Okay.
time. We want to get to Jody. Just so that everybody knows that before we began, we told the candidates that we were going to be fair but flexible and allowing some back and forth. So it's a little different than last time, because one of the critiques that we heard was that we didn't allow that last time. So we wanted to give people some opportunity. So just so everybody knows that. It's not just John.
I apologize.
So Jody Giglio, Councilwoman Giglio, sorry. In the primary campaign, there was a fair amount of fuss about the improvements made to your home during, over time, going back to 2001. And you pledged at that time to pay your back taxes. And I know that for the last 2 years that will automatically go on your tax bill, and you and I discussed what about the time before that, and it's, as you know, a substantial amount of money, maybe upwards of $25,000.
Actually, that's well inflated, probably to $10,000 or more, but.
What's the
go
plan
ahead.
for how to pay it back? That's all.
Yeah, no, we have every intention of paying it back, and if the taxes that weren't paid from 2001 to 2002, that would be paid 2002 to 2003. In these economic times, it's very hard to say, you know what, I have an extra $10,000 in the bank to go ahead and pay it back, but it will be paid back. It will be paid back in full, and my husband and I have committed to that because it's the right thing to do. So there's a lot of talk about how it happened, and it was a big mistake. It was something that was put on the back burner and should have been addressed, and I wasn't paying as much attention to my personal life as I should have, being very passionate about my job. So it was a mistake, and the taxes, I have all my COs, and the taxes will be paid, so.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Ms. Bianchi, you've talked a lot about your 22 years in the Assembly, but your ads have been short on specifics, especially in terms of what you would do as a town councilman. What would your priorities be as a councilman, and how would you achieve them?
Thank you. The number one problem here in the town of Riverhead today, as I understand it, is the financial situation. I mean, the supervisor of the town has said on the front page of your paper that the town is facing a crisis, and if it isn't resolved in 2 years, there could be a massive tax increase to everyone here in the town. So I think it behooves the members of the board to figure out what needs to be done. I'm not on the board, but you can't sweep it under the rug. You have people like Mr. Dunleavy here telling everyone that it's just great, the town has never been better, everything's wonderful, and you have his own supervisor saying on the front page of the paper that the town is headed for disaster. We all know that, we understand it. And maybe the problem with the town board is that some of the members don't have any idea what's going on. Now you have some people on the town board that are not even here in the wintertime. They go to Florida for months at a time. They don't participate in the meetings except by telephone. I don't think that's even legal. I don't see how any board in the state of New York can have members participating when they're 1,500 miles away and say that they're involved with the board. If you're not going to be to the meetings, resign from the board. It's very simple. Get out of there. Don't go to Florida. Stay here and go to work. And if you want a long vacation, well, you know what to do. Make it permanent.
I just want everybody to know that I did not miss a meeting. I flew back here for every town board meeting when I was in Florida. So I did not miss any meetings.
According to the paper this week, the last important meetings on the problem with Costco, it says right in the second paragraph that you missed the meetings. It's in the paper today, John.
Well,
Did
you know
you read
something?
the paper? Did you read the paper today?
You know something?
Did you read the paper today, John?
First of all, I don't attack people personally. I go on the issue.
John, it was-
But I went on vacation.
I'm not
Mr.
making it up,
Mr.
John.
Bianchi, Mr.
I'm
Bianchi,
allowed to take a
let the councilman
I'm
answer.
allowed to take a vacation. I took 2 weeks this year, one in February and one late this month. Everybody that has a job takes at least 2 to 3 to 4 weeks vacation. I took 2 weeks.
John, I don't-
If you want to hold that against me
That's not what
and
I've heard.
attack me personally, that's perfectly all right.
All right, I can see we should brought a gavel tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
Order, let's have order here.
Okay.
Can I say
Yeah,
something?
Ms. Giglio should have a chance.
I'm hearing a lot of, from our opposing candidates that, you know, the town is in a crisis, and the supervisor's saying that the town is in a crisis, but I still haven't heard what the solution is to the crisis. What are your intentions to fix the tax problem?
I think we'll have time.
The answer to that is very simple. Jody, you've had 4 years to figure it out. Don't ask me. You've been paid every year for 4 years to figure it out. You collected the money, but you didn't do anything about it.
Okay,
Like I say, let's please hold the calls.
I've got a whole bunch of questions that will hopefully
I think
flush
these
out
questions
all
will
of
get to
this.
some of these issues, so
But
let's
I would
not.
just like to say that we have cut back on spending significantly, and we have worked on subdividing the land at EPCAL in order to have EPCAL as an asset that we could sell so that there could be tax relief in sight, whereas previous administrations thought it was wise to sell off one big piece of property. I still have not heard an answer to the question. I know that you're a politician, but you have to answer the question. What are you going to do to
That's
solve
right.
the
Now, let's
problem?
move on.
All right.
Jody, I am not a politician. I've been a businessman for 15 years, building a small business into a decent-sized business, which is more than a lot of people on your side can say
Okay,
about
Mr.
themselves.
Bianchi, we're gonna move on now, okay? There's plenty of time for back and forth, or we could just go
Come on.
on like this for the rest of the night. Okay, we're gonna have a series of questions now that we're gonna ask for each of you to answer, okay? The first one, and we're gonna go in this order, that's why we, all right. So, first question is, Riverhead Town Board several years ago gave the planning board authority over most commercial site plan applications. After recent controversies over site plan approvals on Route 58, do you think the town board should take site plan review back from the planning board? Why or why not?
No, I don't think so. The town board is we're limited in time to look at these site plans. The planning board has the knowledge about building and planning and structures, and they go by our code. I think they're doing a great job, other than one slight mistake that they made. But you cannot punish the whole board for a mistake that they might have made. And I just feel that the planning board has been doing a great job, and they should continue to do what they were doing.
Thomas?
Do I get a chance to respond?
You're gonna get your time, everybody's gonna get the.
We all get the same question?
The same question, yes.
Okay, so we can give you a better answer.
Okay.
The planning board takes over any decisions for commercial properties, and I think that they totally dropped the ball on this Costco fiasco.
The question is, do you support taking that site plan review away from them?
I don't think we should take it away from them, but I think that we should have more interaction with the board, because from what I understand, it sounds like they are the last say, and I don't think that that's correct. I think that the board should have some kind of meetings with them, or if they know a big project like this is coming coming to town, I think that they really need to have some kind of opinion with the board. Also, they dropped the ball for $360,000 that the town could have had, and we need that budget money. And they seem to be more pro-development than they are pro-citizen. And I think that's a big problem. And
So how would you rectify that? Just by talking with them?
well, I think that we need to talk to them, but we're not the experts. The board is not the expert. We're looking at plans, and they're supposed to be the experts in that field. I'm wondering if they really are. So I think we have to look at the people who are on that board and say, how did they come to this crazy decision and it lost the taxpayers $360,000 in the land fees. So that was definitely wrong, and they cut down all of the trees. The people there are furious, and they've lost their quality of life. They've also lost their value on their homes, and it's terrible. They didn't have to do that. That was pro-development. It wasn't for what the people wanted. It's very clear that the people are not happy with that.
Councilwoman Giglio?
Yeah. One thing that I would like to start off by saying is that this town board has been very proactive in listening to the community and finding out what the community's needs are and making sure that we adopt legislation that accommodates the community and the taxpayers of the town. And one thing that this town board did was say that we're going to have public hearings for all the site plans in town. You never had public hearings on site plans before. Adjoining neighbors were never notified. No one ever knew when a site plan was getting approved and when construction would start. And we did that. We took on and we said we're going to have public hearings for site plan approval because we think it's important for the community to know. And it's advertised and people know. With the public hearings, it's every town board member's right and every resident's right to appear at the public hearings and express their concerns about a development project. As a town board, it's for us to impose what we feel to an entire board that's supposed to be autonomous from the town board. I don't think that's right. I think that the planning board is a separate board. I think that if the public demanded that the town board take these site plans back and they wanted the town board to take the site plans back, I would say, yes, we could take the site plans back.
What is your opinion of that? Only if there was a public demand for
Well,
it?
I happen to, if you open up a site plan in front of me, I know what I'm looking at. So the fact that this site was cleared from property line to property line is something that was on the plan when the planning board was reviewing it and when it was available for people to see. I just don't think that, I think that the impact hit so hard that it was a big mistake of the planning board and of the town board, which is why we are now imposing 50-foot buffers to residential properties, and also saying that if the screening is not adequate enough to shield the residential development from the commercial development, that they must put in evergreens to block the commercial development from the residential homes. So we've identified a problem and we've found a solution, and that's what we're good at, is finding solutions. When a problem arises, which Costco is the first time since I've been in office that we've had a problem with the planning board, and we're addressing it by making code changes and by also requiring public hearings for more public input.
Everyone can hold their applause.
Mr. Bianchi?
Thank you. I am definitely in favor of taking those powers away from the planning board. The planning board, that we've seen the action of the planning board just last week, about a week ago, it was reported in the paper. The planning board members, who are perfectly nice people personally, sat there in stony silence while the affected members of the community stood up and complained about what was going on. And after they finished their reports, you know what happened? You know what the planning board did? Without asking for any further comment or asking if there's anyone else, they banged the gavel and closed the meeting with no comments to anyone, as the press knows. That's no way to do it. And if that's the way they're going to run the planning board, I think, here's the problem. You have a town government. You have council people and a supervisor. This whole thing is their responsibility. When there's problems in the town, when they clear cut, when they do, you can't pass it off to a planning board. You can't have elected officials saying, it's not my fault, I didn't. In fact, John Dunleavy said in the paper not too long ago, he doesn't know how to read plans. If he doesn't know how to read plans, how the heck would he know whether or not they're clear cutting or they're not clear cutting? That's a quote right out of the paper. I mean, I think most normal people can read plans. Maybe a few people can, but if they can't read it, we get a secretary to read it to you. I mean, try to understand it, for heaven's sake. I mean, I was over there going door to door, meeting these people, and I could tell you all about their houses. Some of the residents said their grandchildren come over for a visit because the area is heavy with senior citizens. And they can write their names on the walls in the living room with all the dust and dirt coming from those
That's time,
bulldozers.
Mr. Bianchi, thank you. Mr. Dunleavy, do you want to reply?
Well, I think that Mr. Bianchi just likes to attack me.
No, I didn't attack at all.
Mr. Bianchi,
I
please.
just want to say, Mr. Bianchi, I'm not a negative campaigner, which he is. What is he doing about this in East Patchogue when you contaminated the soil over there with your greenhouses, which you were cited for last year from the DEC for contamination of the ground over there. So I mean, I'm not a negative guy, but you started, I'm going to bring this up. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you know something? We have to talk about issues, not about, I'm going to get you this time. Let's talk about the issue.
That's 1 minute. You have 30 seconds, Mr. Bianchi, to respond to that.
Well, I thought the hearing today, or this meeting tonight, is about the future of Riverhead. And that's what I came here to talk about. What's going on in the town, how we can make Riverhead better, and how we're going to make very serious changes. I've spoken to our candidate for supervisor, Angela, and she and I, and I think the others will go along with the idea of taking that power back from the planning board. And that's a very major thing.
That's the 30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike?
Actually, Mr. Bianchi, do you want to take a minute to talk about the brownfield in Belport, East Patchogue?
Well,
Just tell me
the
your
property that you're talking about is a property that my family owned until 1990. We sold the property 25 years ago. And during the time that we had it, I can tell you, my parents were very ethical people. We never used anything on the property that was illegal, that was improper. Everything we used was standard operating procedure. And what's happened is that in the interim of the last 25 or 30 years, the scientists have decided that one of the legal chemicals that we used causes a problem with the groundwater. So they have plans to remediate that. Now we're going back to the 60s and 70s. It's a long time ago. The people that did it, unfortunately, have all passed away. The people from that company have passed away. And the item in question was used by the federal government in most of its military applications. And I've seen a pile of papers about this high with all the environmental reports all over the country when they have worked on this question. So it's got really, you know, we bought it legally, it was used to kill termites, and that's what the material was.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thomas, I'll let you start. Again, this is the same question directed to all four candidates. Should the town restore the fire marshal and youth bureau director positions that were eliminated? Why and why not? And if so, how would you pay for it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Could you say that?
Should the town restore the fire marshal and youth bureau director positions that were eliminated? Why or why not? And if so, how would you pay for it?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know that much about that. I hate when any jobs are eliminated though, so it is something that I will research.
Giglio?
Okay? We've had to do more with less, and we eliminated 13 positions. And in those positions, one of them was the fire marshal and then the youth bureau director later. What we did was we said, let's see if we can handle the youth bureau position with the recreation department and with other departments to pull together and do the work of the youth bureau director. And I know that we're planning a meeting coming up soon. We've discussed with the board of the youth bureau to come in and tell us how that's been going. If the needs of the youth in our community that have depended on the youth bureau are being properly attended to and that their needs are being met. So we do have a meeting scheduled for that, and if it's not working out, then yes, I would restore the youth bureau position. As I've said, we've cut back on a lot of spending. We've found better ways to do things. When it comes to the fire marshal, we hired somebody to oversee both the building department and the planning department. We've consolidated the fire marshal's office into the building department in order to make better use of all those positions so that everybody's working all the time. So we've consolidated the fire marshal's office into the building department, and now it's being overseen by one. As soon as we get this full-time senior building inspector, that person that we've hired to oversee all the departments, his task is to figure out how to make the department more efficient and the inspections run more smoothly. So we're finding different ways and innovative ways to do things without having to spend more money. Spending more money is always an easy fix. If you have it, we don't have it. So we have to come up with innovative ways and solutions to the problems and a way to get the job done without spending taxpayers' money.
Can I respond to that?
Do you want to respond to the
No.
question?
You have to answer the question, sure.
Yeah, well, we're talking about cutbacks and what we can do to perhaps prevent them.
The question was about the fire marshal and the youth
Yes.
bureau director position.
Well, I would like to see them restored if we can. And then the question from you will be, where do you get the money to do it? And I have a suggestion that I want to make sure I get out tonight. In talking to the police department, they're very concerned over the fact that they only have one police car to patrol all the big parking lots on 58 with all the box stores. They feel they need a second one because when the parking lots from Costco and Walmart open up, the number of acres that have to be patrolled is going to require another car, and the town says they don't have the money to do it. My suggestion is that the town create a taxing district composed of all the parking areas on 58, a commercial police taxing district, and let the commercial people pay for their own police cars. If they do that, that money is saved for the town budget, and then perhaps you can restore some of the positions that you need to restore. But when I talked to the police people about it, they were very enthused. I think it's the proper way to go as this huge complex of properties gets developed. You know you're going to have more protection. And if you're on the town, you can't say you're not going to have police when you need them. So form a district, let them pay for it, take that burden off all the homeowners. Why should the homeowners have to pay for another police car for these box stores that have millions of dollars and take all the trees down at the same time? They have nothing to their neighbors. They have nothing to their neighbors, to the residents of Riverhead.
Ms. Giglio,
If
rebuttal?
I can respond to that. I'd just like to say that the town gets about $1 million from the county and from the state for our police department to enforce Route 58. So to create a taxing district and a tax and spend mentality in this economy, when the retailers are not doing as well as they would like to do, but they're still paying almost 30% of the taxes, I believe, in the town. I'm actually checking on that number to find out how much they're spending. So if a taxing district were created, how many police officers would you have? Would the police officers be able to, would we still be able to collect that $1 million from the state to pay for the police department, because it's about a $10 million budget?
That's 30 seconds. Mr. Dunleavy, do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
A lot of time is
The
passed.
fire marshal. The fire marshal, we cut back. We want to work with a smaller government. We don't want to work with a large government. we've cut back, we've combined jobs, and they're doing a fine job. I have nothing to say against our fire marshals. We just hired a part-time fire marshal to work with them, and they're getting the job done. As far as, I know Mr. Bianchi came from the state, and the state is tax and spend, or pass it down to the local. The state gives us more unpaid mandates that we have to do, and that all they want to do is tax and spend. We are looking out after our taxpayers. If we could do the same with less, it's great for our taxpayers of the town of Riverhead, and I think we're doing a fine job. Our police department is an excellent police department. It's certified by the state of New York, and not that many police departments are certified. Our fire marshals are out there working with the fire departments, and I think they're doing a great job too. So I think.
So you don't think that other fire marshals should be
So I don't
restored?
think.
Okay.
Right now, the two fire marshals we have and the part-time fire marshal are doing the job that they're expected to do.
How
And
about
it's
the
a fine
youth bureau
job.
director? The other part of the question was about restoring the youth bureau director. I know that's something you've worked with a lot in the past.
The youth bureau?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm for the youth and the seniors. What happened was we cut back on the youth bureau. We tried it for a year. We said we were going to put a director back in if it didn't work, if we lost programs. And I think that we're going to talk about that with the town board and see if we can put a director back in and get a grant to pay for her or him, whichever it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to the next question. Okay, let's start with Ms. Giglio. The third question for all of you, could rotate, is would you vote to support doing an update of the town's master plan, which was adopted 10 years ago? Why or why not? And if so, how would you fund doing the update?
I think the master plan is a great document. I really do, and I've done everything that I can in the 4 years that I've been here to uphold the master plan. I know the master plan took 5 years, hundreds of hours of community input to come up with the end result. If we uphold the master plan and we have our commercial district, which is on Route 58, then we have agricultural protection zone, which is everything essentially north of Route 58, and then we have our other rural corridors, which is in Jamesport, and we have our minimal office use along 25. Other than that, we really don't have any commercial corridors. The master plan upzoned a lot of the properties from a half of an acre, an eighth of an acre to 2 acre zoning, and reduced the school population that could have been, or reduced the town population from, I believe it was 110 or 120,000 down to 40,000, which would definitely slow down the impact on the school district and the taxpayers which is 70% of your tax bill, the school district. So I believe that the master plan is a good project. When it comes time to the hamlet of Wading River, and when the public is interested in us opening it up and taking another look at it, we've done that. The master plan is not, and the zoning that was adopted with it is not even 10 years old yet. So most towns, they haven't updated their master plan in 30 or 40 years. So I think that we've identified areas in the zoning that maybe aren't perfect and changed them in Wading River and in other areas in the town, but when people come before me for a zone change, I think it contradicts the master plan. I don't think that there should be any commercial development west of the Long Island Expressway, which is why I voted no on the settlement of Calverton Manor, which was, a significant retail and housing project right across from Splish Splash. I voted no on other zoning changes in the town, and it hasn't gone anywhere.
That's too much.
I like the master plan. I think it's working very well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bianchi?
My opinion of the master plan is that it has basically served Riverhead well. You're right in the fact that it hasn't been in effect for more than 5 or 8 years officially. I would think that what we could do with a new board is we could not make plans to change it right away, but we could have some hearings around the town for people just to come out and comment on it. And if the board thinks about it and decides there's enough interest, perhaps it could be held up and adjusted. But certainly I wouldn't come out here tonight and say that we have to have a new master plan.
Mr. Dunleavy?
The master plan, it's a living document, and every once in a while you have to tweak it. We just tweaked it in Wading River. We listened to the people in Wading River. They didn't want the zoning that was in place from the master plan. We had hearings, we listened to the people, and we did tweak the master plan and change the zoning in parts of Route 25A in Wading River. So every once in a while you have to look at it, and you have to listen to the citizens of this town. And if the citizens want change, we should make change. We are representing the taxpayers and the citizens of this great town of Riverhead.
Ms. Thomas?
I'm glad that we have the master plan. I think that it's cost a lot of money and it's been working, but we definitely have to see what is not working in the master plan. And I believe that we do have to tweak certain areas of it, absolutely. But I think that to squash the master plan or start all over again is crazy. I think it's pretty good the way it stands. Some tweaking involved if it comes up.
Okay. Now we're going to do something a little bit different at this point. We would like to give you each an opportunity to pose a question to one of your opponents. Please state the name of the candidate you'll be asking the question of. Be brief, and please ask a question and don't make a speech. You'll each have 2 minutes to answer and a chance to respond at our discretion, depending on what happens. So, Mr. Bianchi, you're up next. You can ask a question of any one of your opponents.
It sounds like you're trying to draw blood here. You're sure you don't want us to take our shirts off and give us a knife? I guess, John, I would like to ask Mr. Dunleavy a question. The big question of the night is that, I know John lives in Foxwoods. It's a beautiful area. His house is very nice. I'm impressed with the whole place. But whenever I go knocking on doors, the first thing they say is, we're not voting for John Dunleavy because he didn't support our community.
What's your question?
That's my question.
That's my question.
Why, to John, why are they saying that to me? Why are the people in Foxwoods, when I knock on the door and I say I'm a politician with a card, and they say to me, oh, we have John Dunleavy who lives here, but we're not voting for him this year because he did not support our community and let them clear all the woods. I'm asking John, why do they feel like that if you're networking with your neighbors? That's my question.
Each individual person is a private person. They can vote, they can say what they feel and how they feel. A lot of people think that I, John Dunleavy, was the only person involved with Costco. You can't argue with a person who is mad. A person who is mad has to get frustrated, has to get things out. And I say to them, okay, when you go to the polling, you have to vote for the person who you feel you should vote for. Whether it's me, whether it's somebody else. I'm not arguing with these people. Everyone has a free will to do what they want.
Okay. Okay. Now, following the same rotation, John, it's your turn to ask a question of your choosing to any one of your opponents.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to Nellie again. Okay? In some ads and some commentaries, they said that we did not do anything for Main Street. We're not bringing it back to where it was, even though we do have 18 stores that are rented and operating, and look at this beautiful theater that we did. I want to know how you can improve what we did to Main Street in the town of Riverhead.
I will never take away what you've done because you have given us a good start. However, a lot of these stores come and go, and there are other reasons. I have a daughter that lives in Manhattan. When she comes out on the weekend, and if I'm going to be a little late to pick her up, am I going to let her wait at the train station here in Riverhead? I think not. It's definitely still not a safe area, and I think that we still have to bring tourists here and people. First of all, we're all at fault if we don't come here and patronize all the merchants. We're here tonight, and we should come to every store here, and we should patronize them because we're glad that they are here. When I was a little girl in the 50s, we lived in Rocky Point, and this is where we came to shop. But this is something that happens all over the country because the main areas, the highways are all getting built up with the big box stores. And the big box stores will put us all out of business here downtown if we don't do something about it. I think that it's not marketed properly. When people come out of Tanger Mall, they come from Queens. They should come here to shop. We should have signs saying, visit downtown Riverhead for shops, for the aquarium, for the restaurants. We have tons of restaurants here. We have to make brochures and put all of the stores that are here in town and put them on the little map and put it in all of the hotels, and all of the people come out here for the wineries all the time. Why don't we have brochures and things pointing to this area? My husband and I like to day trip. We go upstate, and we like those little signs that say downtown area, come in and see the shops. And we'll get off the highway and we'll go and have lunch there and visit the shops. And I think we need more of that. We also need...
That's 2 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
Can I respond to that?
You'll have a chance. Let's move along because there's still closing statements.
No? Okay. I would also like to ask Ms. Thomas if,
Well, Ms. Thomas didn't get to ask a question.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. She's
Oh,
next.
I get to ask a question?
Yeah, each of you.
Oh, okay.
We were just going in the room.
Not tonight, but you did talk about in the previous debates, I'm going to ask Ms. Giglio a question, that you saved the town $2 million by putting out to bid the garbage contract.
Yes.
That was great, but the year before the contract was up. Isn't it kind of your job and the job of the board to take any large contract and put it out for bid for the lowest and the most qualified company for any contract? That's just a part of saving money. I know when I was in crisis in my real estate business, I looked at everything that I was spending, and I got a
Ms.
different...
Thomas, Ms. Thomas, we're just going to ask you to just ask the question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The town attorneys come and they tell us when the contracts are about to expire, and that's when we can make the decision to either extend or to go out for bid. And because that contract had not gone out for bid for several years, rather than extending the contract, I suggested we put it out to bid. When I came onto the town board, I became the liaison to the sanitation department. We've done a lot of things with the sanitation department. We've cut back on overtime with the contractor and demanded more of the contractor, where the contractor is actually required to report to the New York State DEC, where our staff in town hall was doing it. So on a quarterly basis, they're doing that. They're also paying the town 20% of whatever recyclables we bring in. And every year that number increases. And this year, I'm proud to say that we'll be giving some of that funding to a budget to the Key Club that will be teaching the kids in the high school of the importance of recycling. And that's one thing that I heard when I was walking around from door to door when I was campaigning, and we had to wait until the contract was ready to expire in order to put it out for bid. So there was a very short time to put it out for bid. There were no bid specifications for it. I asked the town board for $7,500 to hire a town engineer to put together a bid spec package that was 1 page, turned into 35 pages, and ended up cutting back on overtime and saving over $2 million townwide and $200 per household. But I was very active in the code amendments to Chapter 103, having hundreds of hours of meetings with our engineer and with our town attorneys to come up with a code and with a sanitation contract that would not only save taxpayers money, but would actually bring more money into the taxpayers and create a better environment for all of us that we live in.
Yeah, Ms. Giglio, do you have a question for any of your opponents?
I did, and it was from Millie Thomas, and it was that you stood with the Riverhead Neighborhood Preservation Coalition on the property on 25A in Wading River, saying that we should do away with commercial development. And your real estate business being one of those commercial developments, would you support the change of the zone of that property to a residential use instead of a commercial use?
I think that we definitely could use a senior citizen housing, and it doesn't have any impact on the school. That would be a better choice than more commercial, because the people in the area are just not happy with empty stores, and if we already have merchants there that aren't doing that well, we don't need any more.
So answer the question, would you be in favor of changing the zone on your property from commercial to residential?
You're talking about my property where my office is?
Yes,
Would I change it?
yes.
No, it's been used as a real estate office since the 80s.
Thank you.
Why would we want to change it? I thought you were talking about the vacant properties.
No, you're standing on that property and we're talking about changing the zoning in that corridor for everything west of McDonald's to make it residential or multifamily residential, but you've answered the question, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to closing statements now. And we're just going to start here and move down, okay? So, John,
You have 3 minutes
you
each.
go first. You have 3 minutes to make a closing statement.
Okay. I've been your town councilman for the past 8 years. I was on a team that negotiated a contract that gave $7.5 million to the taxpayers of the town of Riverhead, even though construction never started on the project. Negotiated cell towers. They're bringing in $307,000 to the town to help the taxpayers of the town of Riverhead. The parking district. A house was purchased for the parking district, and after they finally had a price, I said, let me go talk to these guys a little more, and I reduced it for another $30,000 to help the parking district and their tax base. The police department, I obtained 2 canine dogs and 1 ATV, and one on the way, another ATV on the way from the district attorney's office, which is going to help the taxpayers of the town of Riverhead. Acted as a department head for 3 years at the municipal garage, reducing overtime and saving $60,000 a year in salary for the department head. I did that for 3 years. Also, I reduced the budget by 20%. I researched and wrote the taxi cab ordinance to help the quality of life of the people who need taxi cabs to ride back and forth for our senior citizens and people who can't afford vehicles, for clean and ready to go taxi, and they know that the person behind the wheel has a clean license and is not any criminal. I wrote the rental law in the town, which strengthened it, that every year they have to be inspected. Every 2 years they have to be inspected for safety, for fire, so nobody dies in these rental houses. So they have to be inspected every 2 years. And that also brings money into the town because we charge a rental fee. And I think as you're going forward, as your councilman downtown, we supported this theater, where the old administration wanted to bring back the theater and gave Mr. Castaldi a hard time. We said, Mr. Castaldi, go for it. And look what he did with this theater. Bring it in. The big stores. We're not going to have any box stores down here. We used to have department stores, Bohats. They were down here. Now we have big empty stores. And what happened down by the ice cream parlor, the pizza place, and the bakery, cut these big stores
3 minutes.
cut these big stores into small stores, and they'll thrive. And that's what's happening on Main Street.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
I'm not a politician. As I said before, I am a business person. I think we need someone with strong business sense and someone who can handle the crisis management that we need to do with the issues that we now have in Riverhead. I also would like to say that I was a past president of the Long Island Board of Realtors in the North Shore chapter, and I've attended and also conducted many board of director meetings, and they're always handled in a professional way. This board that currently exists talks about how they get everything done, but I think it's common knowledge that they fight a lot, and it's kind of like a Jerry Springer show sometimes. And I'd like to bring back professionalism to the town board. I think that that really needs to be done in order to, and you're not always going to win, but you have to do the best for the taxpayers and the residents of Riverhead. You're not always going to win, and it's no reason to fight. You just have to step back and say, the vote is this, and I have to go along with it. So that's one thing. I also would like to say that I want more of the voice of the people. I think that they need to get more involved. I'd like to hear their ideas, and I think that they have very good ideas talking to people. I've been walking and talking to people that have great ideas, but a lot of them are afraid to come to the board and talk about these ideas or talk about their concerns, and I think that's crazy. They should definitely, I want a more open government, and I want the voice of people to be heard, and I think that we have a lot of issues, and we have to address them right away. If you don't do something about the budget, we're going to have to raise taxes. Nobody wants that. And we have to start putting money back into the Community Preservation Fund. I know that the real estate market, of course, as I know, has gone down, and that's why we were able to borrow on that fund. But we have to stop doing that. We need to preserve land, and we have to tighten that budget up as best as we can.
Thanking our hosts for allowing the candidates to bring forth their visions to make Riverhead a better town than what it is, and to give our input about how we would approach moving forward through the town. I'd also like to thank each and every one in the audience for being here tonight and for your passion about the town of Riverhead, and for your questions that you spend time, and for the time you take out of your busy schedule to be here tonight to listen. 4 years ago, when I ran for public office the very first time, I made several promises to Riverhead taxpayers. I promised you that I would always be mindful of the taxpayers' money, and I believe I've lived up to that by finding innovative ways to improve your quality of life, the town code, and to change things that aren't right in the town code. Now I'm running for re-election because I have delivered on those promises, and I know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. As your councilwoman, taxpayers have counted on me to ask the tough questions, which is why we went out for bid on our sanitation contract, which resulted in $2 million savings townwide and almost $200 per household. You have to ask those questions. We need the real savings at this time. I was one board member that rejected a pay raise. That's $1,800 a year, and although an extra $150 a month would have been nice, I realized during these economic times that our families are struggling, and it's not a good time for elected officials to be voting themselves pay raise. So I rejected that pay raise. I've enjoyed serving on your town board, and though there have been public differences amongst the board members, each of us is committed in our dedication to controlling taxes and spending while improving services like roads and public safety. We gave the highway superintendent almost $1 million to pave roads in his budget that he never had before. So our collective goal is to leave the town in a better condition than it was when we took office 4 years ago. And I can say with confidence that the town is better today than it was almost 4 years ago when I took office. Downtown is better, there is life. Our spending is down and tax relief is in sight with subdividing the property at EPCAL and creating small business opportunities for entrepreneurs that can't afford to spend $55 million on a piece of property, but they might be able to afford $750,000 for a piece of property to start a manufacturing business and create the high-paying jobs that we lost when Grumman left. If re-elected, I promise to continue my work to protect your tax dollars while improving services and improving the town code, which I am very diligent about. I know that we're limited on time, so if you would like to find out more about me, you can visit my website at jody2013.com. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you here tonight. It has been an honor to serve as your councilwoman for the last 4 years, and I humbly ask for your support in this upcoming election on Tuesday night, a week from Tuesday. So please come out and vote, be a part of the democratic process, and I love my job, and thank you for allowing me to serve.
Mr. Young, you two have 3 minutes. Your closing statement.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and so I don't forget, on a personal note, I do want to point out that my mother came from an old Long Island family, and as we look up the genealogy for the DAR, the first supervisor of the town of Riverhead was one of my ancestors. So I don't know if there's anybody else, but he served in Riverhead from 1792 to 1793, the first supervisor. It was a very difficult time. The revolution was almost completed, and I'm on the Suffolk Historical Society, and we were given some information the other day about how bad it was. So when you consider how far Riverhead has come, it's doing very well. But you know what? It can do better. I think that my 22 years in Albany, you know, one thing that happens when you're in Albany, you work with two parties. Normally, the Assembly for many, many years has been Democratic, and the Senate has been Republican. So you can't pass one bill in the Assembly as a Democrat unless you have a senator who's going to pass it in the other house and the other party. And I think that's very important. Not to be personal again, but I was shocked. We did that press conference that you were referring to about the change of zoning in Wading River. And I went to the press conference in the parking lot, and Mr. Dunleavy was there, but when he spoke to the reporters, and he said, I can't stay because there's Democrats here. I can't stay because there's Democrats here. I never in my life heard anything like that. And the only time I read things like that is when you read about the right-wing people down in Washington, the Tea Party people. I hope we're not bringing Tea Party values to the town of Riverhead. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. I think Riverhead has a great future. I look forward to working with the people who are on the board and not up for election, because they'll be there no matter what. And I want to help steer Riverhead in the best possible way. And my door and office will be open for everyone at any time, the way it was when I was the assemblyman. I actually had so many people coming in. I had an office with 5 people, and the door was open most of the time with a line of people, because we took care of problems at the state level, county level, town level. I wasn't in those offices, but we knew how to do it. And I want to do that for the people here too. Thank you very much for having me.
I want to thank you for holding this.
You're welcome. Thank you
Both of
for
you
thank
and
you for
the
this
Riverhead local. Thank you.
very spirited discussion. We appreciate it. Next time we'll just get right to the mud wrestling.
On stage here we have Supervisor Sean Walter, Republican, and Democratic challenger Angela DeVito. Thank you. And this is sort of the main event. There was a lot of applause last time. If we could, please, we don't want to be here all night. We could hold our applause to a minimum. Thank you. No, that's, I mean, basically there's 2 minutes for each question with a 1 minute or 30-second rebuttal allowed depending on the situation. All right, this question for Sean Walter. Mr. So Walter, you've repeatedly and publicly banged heads with fellow board members during your first 4 years in office and have been criticized for your behavior while in office. Do you plan on any changes if you're elected to a third term?
Well, you know, one of the things that I've said over and over again is we're not always going to get along. The question is getting the job done. The reality is sometimes you have to crack an egg to make an omelet. I know you've heard me say that before. We may not always get along, but look what we've accomplished. You are sitting in one of our accomplishments right here. This would not have happened but for the Republican Town Board. All you've got to do is look across the street to the businesses that opened on Main Street and understand that it wasn't anything more than the Republican Board working together to move things forward. So are we going to get along? No, of course not. Because if we always got along and did everything the same, we probably wouldn't accomplish these things. Sometimes a little adversity sparks great ideas. So, you know, the bottom line is I'm going to continue a path of progress and moving this town forward. And, you know, when you look at the momentous piece of legislation that was started today, signed today by the governor, you'll see that that took a lot of trips back and forth to Albany, and the people that I met with over and over and over again, they didn't all get along on this legislation, but we got it done, and that's the key. You've got to get it done.
This next question is for Ms. DeVito. You resigned suddenly from the Riverhead School Board midterm. What do you say to your critics who have called you a quitter, or voters who might be concerned about your commitment to the job as supervisor if elected?
And your question is why, or whether or not I would quit
What
being
is your
supervisor?
response?
My response is I provided a response at the time that I tendered my resignation in the third year of a third-year term, having also already served 5 years. And I also explained my reasons in an interview in the newspaper with regard to why I was leaving. But it's a good question, and actually I'm glad for the opportunity to answer it. How many of you out there have been involved with elder care? Raise your hands. I spent 2 years every day after work from 3 o'clock to 7:30 at night with a mother who was dying slowly before me with vascular dementia. When she finally passed away, I thought I was prepared for it, but I wasn't prepared for the depth or the extent that my grief incapacitated me. Now, I could have continued on that school board by not going to meetings because there's no attendance requirement. I could have gone to meetings and been a non-participant because you're really not required to participate in that school board. Or I could have made a decision that at that point I was no longer really functional and not doing the job for which I had been elected to. And I believe in leadership that is able to say, I can no longer do the job and I need to step aside. And quite frankly, if something like that was to happen to me while I was in office in town hall, where I could no longer perform the job that I was elected to do and meet those expectations, I would step down once again. To me, that is a sign of good leadership rather than staying in and merely filling space for the sake of filling space.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is for Ms. DeVito. Supervisor has touted his work in helping to get state legislation passed that will help finally develop town land at EPCAL. If elected, will you stay the course with EPCAL, or do you think a new approach is needed?
I would definitely stay the course with EPCAL. I have to congratulate and say that the legislation that has been passed will provide a mechanism. It is a tool by which we can go forward with development at EPCAL. However, my concerns with what is prepared for EPCAL is as follows. The reports that we got from the consultants that we hired to do the reuse plan as well as the marketing plan talk about a development at EPCAL that will take approximately 10 years. And today, in the news report in which our town supervisor, Sean, pointed out that using Start Up New York, a program that is touted by Governor Andrew Cuomo as the basis for businesses at EPCAL, I think we have to look at, how many of you out there know what Startup New York is all about? Startup New York is a program that's a tax incentive program that creates tax zones in which businesses who come into those tax zones are tax-free 100% for 10 years, which means that we would be bringing into EPCAL those businesses, if we followed through with what was indicated or inferred in the news today, we'd be following through with a 10-year delay in realizing taxes from EPCAL. And plus with a 10-year build-out plan and going development for it, we're looking at approximately 20 years before, as a town, we would really realize what we envision we would like to get from EPCAL. But to answer your question, no, I wouldn't throw that out and start a new approach. It would be stupid to do so.
Mr. Walter?
Well, Angela, I'm glad you share my vision on that, but what you don't share is Governor Cuomo's vision. In fact, you don't even understand the basics of Startup New York. See, Startup New York has nothing, zero to do with EPCAL. What Startup New York does is it allows businesses to go into SUNY campuses or college campuses, yes, 100% tax-free. And what amazes me is that a governor of your political party came to Riverhead and said, listen, Supervisor Walter, you are doing a wonderful job. Your board's doing a wonderful job. This is wonderful legislation for the state of New York. And what, Mr. Vito, will happen is if businesses come into Business Incubator, they can stay for 10 years. But after 10 years in the Startup New York program, they have to go someplace. The someplace is EPCAL. They're also limited in square foot to 200,000 square feet. Some of these businesses, if they're really successful, are going to be far larger than 200,000 square feet. So wouldn't it be a great idea for them to be able to come to EPCAL and get approval in 90 days? This fits hand in glove with what Governor Cuomo did. And I am proud to partner with Governor Cuomo and the state of New York to do this. And I am ecstatic that
Did you want to take 30 seconds?
I think that in looking at the Startup New York program and what was stated today and provided to individuals in the press by Sean was totally different from what he's just stated right now. He referred to totally different, okay? And the thing is that I did do my homework. I did look up the Startup New York program, and yes, it does talk about incubators in Stony Brook. And are we going to be finally utilizing the Stony Brook incubator space
100% occupied.
Well, so where is the Stony Brook incubator space going to be? For the Startup New York program, for those businesses that will then eventually, 10 years down the road, look to us at EPCAL. It's still 10 years down the road. It's still not going to provide us with the monies that we envision, other than selling off the land. That's the quick fix.
Next question.
We can butt that because there's so much misinformation there, it's not even funny.
You want to take 30 seconds?
Ms. DeVito, maybe you don't understand that, again, the business incubator sits on 50 acres, and then the 50 acres will allow much more development, so you could put new buildings there under Startup New York. And there's something I learned very young: don't believe everything you read in the press.
Well, you shouldn't make false statements then in the press.
This is for Mr. Walter. Angela DeVito has said you've taken credit for projects in downtown that either were in the works or had started during prior administration or would have happened anyway. What is your response to those criticisms?
You know, I have several responses, but one of the things that I'd like to say, all you have to do, I've got about 50 newspaper headings. New York Times, curtains and hope for renewal going up. Newsday, one building at a time. Dance papers, positively Riverhead, new things happening all the time. Riverhead Patch, major sidewalk repairs. Riverhead Local, hottest restaurateur in the Hamptons. Long Island Jewish World. Riverhead moves ahead, gateway to the East End. Riverhead News Review, and I can go on and on and on. You see, the thing that Ms. DeVito doesn't understand about business, she used some word to infer that what we do in Town Hall was somehow wrong. She said, oh, we grease the wheels. That just makes me realize that Mr. Vito has no concept as to how business works. Again, if you look at what Governor Cuomo is doing, he is rolling out the red carpet for businesses. And you know what my administration and this Republican town board does? We roll out the businesses, roll out the invitation businesses come. And the thing that really just summed it all up, Dennis McDermott, when he was done with his initial meetings, when we were courting him to come here, he says to me, and he says to the press, and you can look it up, it felt like the supervisor threw rose petals at my feet. That's what it takes to make downtown come back. That's what's working. That's what I'm going to continue to do. And that's what we're going to do at EPCAL. If I've got to throw rose petals at their feet, if I've got to travel to Albany or upstate or anywhere in this country to attract businesses, I'll be there with the rose petals.
You can throw all the rose petals you want, but we live in Riverhead, and we know who comes to downtown Riverhead. Where is the pedestrian traffic? Where are the families in Riverhead? And what I did say in criticism of just the single-minded and focused view on creating and bringing businesses here is that it is great, and the credit should be given to those people, to those businesses that have invested in downtown Riverhead, and I give them that great credit for that. But the thing that we haven't done, and that needs to be done, is that we need to get rid of the persistence of prostitutes in downtown. We need to get rid of drug dealing in downtown. We need to clean up Grangeville Park. I spoke with a young mother today who lives up on Roanoke Avenue, and I said to her, what would make you come to downtown Riverhead? I said, what would make you use Grangeville Park? She said, you have to clean it up first. So my proposal is that, and what I think is a role that local government needs to take, and I thought Sean was a lawyer and not a businessman, by the way, but a role that local government needs to take is to create that environment that will make downtown not only business open, but open to people for pedestrian traffic and family friendly.
30 seconds.
Angela, you talked a good game, but you just said nothing. But I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you what I did. Main Street has more police presence. Main Street has more police presence than any other sector in this town.
And
Main
why?
Street, when we took office in 2010, there was a business known as Casa Rica. It took me 6 months to shut that down. Supervisor Cardinale didn't shut it down. 6 months we shut it down. So while you're talking about what will happen, you didn't tell us what you do, but I'm telling you what I've done. We've increased foot patrols, we've increased manpower at Main Street, and we've actually made budget transfers and put a couple $100,000 extra towards Main Street. So unless you've got some ideas,
You'll get a chance later. Please, you'll get a chance in a few minutes if you wanted to talk about some of that. Let's move on to the next question.
Angela, did he go? Mr. Beer, sorry. With reserve funds shrinking, the town could be facing a big tax hike in 2014. Mr. Walters says land sales at EPCAL or borrowing against that land is the answer to hold down taxes. Do you agree, or what, if anything, would you do differently?
I stated before that I don't believe mortgaging the land at EPCAL is a good plan. I don't know who will be lending us the money as a mortgager, okay? However, I don't believe that in order to deal with debt or catastrophic drop-off in tax revenues, that you borrow more money and go more into debt. I mean, it appears, you know, Mr. Walter has said, Sean has told us that town government was run as if people had a credit card. And we all remember in the 80s and 90s, you'd get every week in the mail, you get something that said, transfer your monies from one credit card to another. We seem to be transferring our debt from one area to another with this proposal for mortgaging EPCAL. It's a short-term solution. One of the things that and he called it pie in the sky, is to consider getting our fair share of retail sales tax. We have never asked for that. We have never put a proposal in to ask for that. We have never also asked the state. You have all of these lands in our town, whether it be the Otis Pike Preserve, whether it be Wildwood State Park, the Jamesport State Park, all of those preserved lands. Sean has pointed out 25% of the land in Riverhead is preserved and therefore does not offer property taxes that can be utilized to balance our budget or to reduce the burden on residential property tax owners. We need to go to the state and sit down and say, okay, can you and what can you do to assist us with all of these properties that you have here, paying some taxes on them? There are provisions in real property law as well as state finance law for local governments that can make this happen. We just have to begin to ask. And I believe that you have to ask. You can't assume that someone's going to say no if you've never asked. Let them tell us why, let us explore that.
Okay, thank you.
It's
course he's gonna
almost,
laugh.
you know, your response to that is interesting. So let me start from the beginning. Well, actually, let me start with this. I mentioned to County Executive Malone, who was also a Democrat, your theory about what you wanted to do, and he laughed at me. So there's no way that the county is going to allow the town to have the sales tax because the county's entire budget, but for about 5%, is balanced on sales tax. It's not going to happen. But perhaps you haven't really been paying attention to what's happened in the Suffolk County Legislature. So let me inform you about a couple of things that are happening. Jay Schneiderman and former
Please no heckling, okay?
Jay Schneiderman and former legislator Romaine attempted over and over to pass legislation to get the East End more sales tax revenue for the police department. And you know what happened? It failed 16-2 every time. So that's pie in the sky. You're not going to get more sales tax revenue. Now, in terms of mortgaging the property, listen, that's a terrible thing to have to do. I would prefer to work the way, again, you know, this must be Governor Cuomo Day. I'm really happy with him. They came up with equity finance partners for the Frogs Neck Bridge. That is something that I think we need to look at. The bank that the town banks with probably will stand in the place if we had to mortgage the money. But the reality is it's that the Democrats that were spending 3 times the rate of inflation prior to me coming in caused this problem, much like the school board that was spending 2.5 times the rate of inflation while you were there, and trying to put a $120 million bond on the top of the residents of Riverhead. So we've corrected it, and we will continue that course correction.
2 minutes.
I'd like
Mr.
to
Vito, you'd like
respond to that. Yes, in that, you know, Sean, you like to point out the fact that you have all the information and you really know the facts there, but what you don't know about the school district is that during my tenure, we voluntarily capped our spending, and each year we reduced it even more. Okay, and I worked with individuals on the school board to do this. And to say that because a prior administration did not attend to things, we can also go back to the Cos administration. He didn't attend to things either. Okay, so pointing the finger of blame does not fix the problem for the future or today. It just does not, and you simply cannot do that. And you know, you can make fun of me. That's fine. You know, have your good time at it. But the bottom line is that, yeah, you talk to Steve Ballone, and Steve Ballone says this. That's not the final answer, you know, and it just isn't. You need to pursue it a bit more. I just don't think you can be that cavalier with the future of Riverhead.
Okay. Okay, this next question will be directed at Mr. Walter. Mr. Walter, you've touted your accomplishments in helping bring back downtown, but certainly there's much more to be done. Just look at there's still a large swath of empty shops immediately outside this theater. What, if anything, could be done about the aging, oversized building stock and what are your future plans for downtown?
I just want to address one thing. Angela, when you don't know the answer or have an answer that's better, it's not making fun of you. And I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm not here to make fun of you. If you don't
No,
know
it's
the
your
answer,
whole,
I'm not
Sean, it's
making
your
fun
whole
of you.
approach. Your whole approach is, you're so sarcastic, and I love the governor, and he's a Democrat, and blah, blah, blah. I know exactly what you're doing.
Angela, if you don't know the answer,
If I don't know the answer, I will say I don't know the answer. And anybody that knows me knows that very well. I'm the first person to say I don't know the answer, and I'll go and get the information.
don't sit here and say that I'm making fun of you. because
You are, as you did the other night in Calverton. You
Sure,
did.
you have a minute and a half now.
So the reality is for downtown, there are several, I'm going to say 50% of the vacant stores actually have activity in them. We know the Woolworth building, we know the West Marine building is going to be occupied by the Long Island Science Center. Blue River or Blue Water is coming to West Main Street. They're in the process of getting their final approvals, and that project looks like it's going to be a reality. In fact, there's some exciting stuff happening in the Ben Franklin building, that some things that have been reported, some things that don't. And probably the most exciting thing, and I don't want to talk about it because it's not done yet, but Riverhead Enterprises is entertaining a very large developer right now. What can you do? We're going to continue to do the things we're doing. When we find good projects, we're going to promote them and we're going to move them forward. There's certainly a long way to go with some of these stores. I do believe that some of the stores will probably get ultimately knocked down, probably the old Sears building, if this new project comes to pass. But I don't go any place in New York State or any place anywhere without looking and trying to figure out things to bring to Main Street, and I'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Ms. DeVito?
And what, I have a question now.
It's less of a response and more of answering the same question in a way. What are some of your ideas and your vision to help downtown progress?
I think that we need to continue working with our business improvement district as well as the Chamber of Commerce on bringing businesses to downtown. I think that is a very important part of what needs to be done. But I think we also need to first define what is it that we want downtown to be. We know what Route 58 is. It's the breadbasket. We go there shopping, whether it's food shopping, automobile shopping, clothes shopping, whatever it is you do. We made that decision years ago to do that. But what is it that we really want downtown to be, to look like? And a block-by-block approach sounds good, and it has been successful, but we really haven't established a character for downtown Riverhead. It just isn't there. The other things that I would do is, in terms of creating an environment, is to look at how we can clean up 2nd and 3rd Street. I know there is currently an individual that has bought on Roanoke Avenue the Oddfellows building, I believe, and is looking to bring in more retail space there, which would begin to provide some type of anchor for that area. But we need to think about what we want the surrounding areas to look like, as well as looking at what we want West Main Street to look like.
How do you establish a character, as you said? How do you establish a character?
The character needs to basically come out of discussions that you have with people that are your planners, that are your realtors, are your business people in terms of what you'd like to have. And it's also, I understand that there's a survey going on for downtown, what people would like to have here, and those sorts of things. We have gotten information on what we would like our downtown to look like, to be in that. And in terms of having a single vision for myself, no, I don't have one. Okay, I don't. I think it's something that should come from the entrepreneurs as well as the community. And we also need to, and I've said before, we need to work and partner with Southampton on the other side of the river as they develop and revitalize that particular area and go through with that, so that collectively we can achieve a full revitalization of the downtown area.
Thank you.
I respond.
You want to take those?
Well, the interesting part is that not only will we be working with Southampton, we've offered sort of tentatively that if we can hook them up to the sewer district, we would. Not only do we work with the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Improvement District, but we work with all facets of downtown. But you know what I want the character to look like? Patchogue. I want the character to look like Fort Jeff. I want the character to look like Greenport. I want the character to look like Sayville. You know what that character is? Those are full stores. That's a bustling downtown. And I'm not going to ask for more than that. I don't think that we would be entitled to more than that. That's what everybody else has. And that's the character I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, and for the next part of the debate, we are going to ask you to, oh, we have one more question. Oh, let's just go right to that. We're going to ask you to ask each other questions. We'll start with you, Mr. Vito. Ask the supervisor.
This is the out of blood portion.
This is the unscripted portion. So you get to ask him a question.
Where do you buy your boots?
He's going to get to ask you a question.
Go west.
I've been west. Question for Sean. As we all know, the audit reports that we get talk about that our mechanisms for checks and balances are working better. We still have to have more work on them, and they've projected, though, economically, we're heading for catastrophe with regard to increases of taxes. For the next 2 years, what would you specifically do to increase the revenue stream sufficiently to hold residential property taxes at a bare minimum for increases that would just reflect what the bargaining unit salary and benefits increases would require as an increase in town budget?
That is the most difficult question facing this town, and I applaud you for asking it. Right now, the town should receive, with the economic development on Route 58, we're about $3.5–4 million behind in the budget. The town should receive between $500,000 and $750,000 in tax revenues for Route 58. The town is expanding in other areas. I'm hoping that next year there'll be $1 million additional taxes in the budget. But the reality is we're not going to get there from here. We don't have enough money in the reserves to keep doing what we're doing. So the question becomes really twofold. Is it the mortgage question, which I agree with you, it's probably the worst thing we could do, but it might buy us time. There may be some land sales, but we have to have a fallback position. And I intend to work very closely with the governor's office and Senator Laval, who is also the author of this legislation, but to work with them very closely on finding equity partners in EPCAL. See, when you have EPCAL and you've got a 90-day permit approval, it's very difficult in this economy to raise capital to build buildings. If the town is in a position with an equity partner where that partner can provide the financing for the construction of these buildings and at the same time provide some relief to the town, I'm not saying making them a partner with us, but I think that's a better deal than just doing, we don't want to just sell off large chunks of land to balance the books. This is supposed to be an economic engine for the East End. We've got to get ourselves in a position with both the subdivision. There's 3 legs to this stool, really. It's the subdivision, the environmental and sewer and infrastructure, and the equity. We've got the subdivision. Senator Laval is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but kind of committed the state to getting the sewage treatment plant built, and we're going to hold him to that. The third leg of that stool is the money, and that's what I will focus on next year, probably 50% of the time.
Okay. Mr. Vito.
All right, this is going to be a really tough question.
Yeah, did you want to
because
Sean, can I cut you off real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Vito, did you want to take 30 seconds?
I just guess that the response that we've gotten is that there really isn't any plan for the next 2 years for that. It's a long-term plan. It's a very big investment, and with regard to improving the infrastructure, I know that you have met with both DOT, New York State DOT, about road access, as well as meeting with Senator Laval to go to the state and pitch for monies for the infrastructure, specifically the sewer district improvements and that will be needed out at EPCAL. But we're also looking at, we did get $8 million out of $22 million, and that means that there are some $14 million still on the table that will probably have to be bonded. So again, we're looking at increased debt, and I really didn't hear how in the next 2 years we were going to do that. Deal with that. And not deal with that increased bond debt, but just with increasing the revenue streams so that we don't fall off the cliff, as has been predicted in for 2015.
The $18 million, the $8 million you're talking about is for the Riverhead sewage treatment.
Riverhead sewage,
not
correct.
the Calverton sewage
Right.
treatment
I
plant.
didn't say it was.
And the equity partners would be one of the ways that we'd be looking at this. The equity being they would have the money, giving them somewhat a piece of the action so that they have some skin in the game, we have some skin in the game, and when somebody comes to build there, they're going to have a financier ready and willing to finance their project. For that, they're going to have to pay the town something. This is the largest commercial industrial subdivision in New York State. You could fit the entire Hop Hog Industrial Park in here. I dare say there's going to be some equity firms that are very interested in getting a piece of this action, and the town of Riverhead should benefit from that.
You have a question for Mr. Vito?
This is a tough question because it follows on with what they asked you before. One of the most difficult jobs of this town, this town takes or just being town supervisor takes a tremendous emotional toll. And I am very cognizant of the fact what happened with your mother. My mother fell ill on a cruise in 2011, and somewhat a public way because I had to leave a town board meeting, and I flew to Scotland, and we thought she was going to pass away, and we flew her back here. After about 30 days, she was able to come back, and my point is that 2011 to 2012 was probably the worst year of my life. And in that, we had a hurricane to deal with. We had decisions that had to be made. And I will tell you that when you get the phone calls, like I received this past week with 2 police officers that passed away, or I get the phone calls when there's a car wreck and somebody dies, that is part of the job. And there was no point at that time that when my mother was sick and we were going through the hurricane, there was no point that I could say, I'm going to be a good leader and step down, because that would have been terrible. This town, we would have put people's lives at risk.
Excuse me, please.
We would have put people's lives at risk. So I need to hear from you,
Ask the question.
for me as a resident, to know how you're going to change your answer, because you can't have the answer, well, a good leader steps down. You can't. It's not something you can do. So I need to know how you are going to handle that stress.
The stress of the job, and I did sympathize with you during the time that you were struggling with your mother's illness and subsequently with her passing. What I believe I described for myself was the fact that as a volunteer, even though you're elected to the school board, I was at a point after 2.5 years, which is the term of office, by the way, 2 years is a term of office for town supervisor. In that 2 years, if I had been town supervisor from 2009 to 2011, I would have been taking care of that elder care. I would have been dealing with the stress of watching a parent slowly die in front of me, and knowing that there was absolutely nothing that I could do. I dealt with that stress. Some of the things that perhaps you don't know about me, which because you've asked and this becomes very personal, I will share with you. I have held responsible positions in most of my career, and I have gone through the death of a child and have held those positions and didn't quit them. So in terms of what I would do for Riverhead, the stress of the job and the stresses that you describe that you endure within this post, I certainly can endure those. I no longer have any parents that can pass away from vascular dementia, and I no longer have family members who may be subject to the same disease. So for me, that sort of crisis and that grief that followed all of that is not something that's going to be a part of my life. The stresses that you talk about with passing of police officers, the passing of and having to deal with hurricanes, blizzards, crises in town hall, buildings that burn down, all of those things, I have sustained those in positions that I have held in the past, and I haven't left them.
Each candidate will have 3 minutes for a closing statement. Mr. Walter, you're going first.
Thank you. I want to thank the press, the News Review, Riverhead Local, and everybody that came out here today. Today marks the day that ends. We are past the crossroads at EPCAL. The day the governor signed the legislation to move EPCAL forward is a momentous occasion for this town. It was passed unanimously in the Senate and with only one assembly member dissenting. And the reason they did that is they believed in this town, as I do believe in this town. We came to office several years ago, and Main Street was 80% vacant. We had a place called Costa Rica with drugs and prostitution and crime. Now we sit in the historic Suffolk Theater. It's open. You've got the Hyatt Place down the road, Ralph's Italian Ices, Blue Duck, the Riverhead Project, and we can go on, but you know what? You don't have Costa Rica anymore, and we, the Republican board, did that. This is all done in the backdrop of a terrible economy. We have our problems, but they're not enough to just identify them. We have to solve them. We do this by working with the chamber and the bid. We do this by working with the Riverhead Police Department. On the budget, we inherited a financial system that was 10 and 20 years behind in our financial audits. We spent more than 3 times the rate of inflation. Fast forward to today, all the audits are complete. The Comptroller's Office gave us a clean bill of health. We sold our debt at 2% and 3%, and we maintained our credit rating. This average spending in the 4 years I've been in office has been 1.74%. That's in fact. Contrast that to the Riverhead School District spending while you were in office was 5%. That's laudable, but it's not as good as the town did. My friends, this was a race between talk and results. You must measure the Democrats' rhetoric against the Republican results. It's very easy to be an armchair quarterback like Angela is, and it is another thing to get on the field and play the game. Angela, you've been in responsible positions like the IDA, the Animal Advisory Committee, the school board, but you've never taken a position of responsibility. You railed against the education system, which you were a part of. You complained about the traffic on every development on Route 58, but you were part of the IDA. You were on the Animal Advisory Committee, yet it was a Republican board that privatized the shelter. The key difference between Angela and I is that we both have had responsible positions, but I delivered results. I ask you tonight to vote for Sean Walter and the entire Republican team so that we may continue to move this town forward. Thank you.
Mr. Vito.
Thank you also to the News Review and Riverhead Local for this evening and the opportunity to speak in front of residents of Riverhead. I'd like to thank you, Riverhead, for showing up. It's good to know that there are people who are committed and interested in our town. Sean points out quite correctly that I don't have a bragging list of all the things that I've done in Town Hall because I haven't been in Town Hall. I haven't had that opportunity to do work within Town Hall. I have been a presence there for some 14 years, looking to make things better for the community that I lived in, and I have been successful at many of the things that I have attempted. But I'm not going to give you a list of everything I've done in my life. Go to my website and you can see the things that I have accomplished in my lifetime. The thing that I will say is that Sean made 3 promises coming into office in 2009. He promised fiscal responsibility and accountability. We're broke. He promised EPCAL, it's still empty. And he promised downtown revitalization, and there still is no pedestrian traffic or a sense of safety for families to come down here. So when you go to the polls on November 5th, remember that that promises made, promises kept is rhetoric. He talks of rhetoric in his closing statement, accuses me and the Democrats of rhetoric. He also is full of rhetoric. One of the things that you also have to look at is the ability in our town when people feel that politics has taken preference over good governance, they make a change. We have always been a town that has made that change when it is necessary. And this November 5th, I would ask you to make the choice for good governance and not politics as usual. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates. Thanks to the Suffolk Theater for opening the doors for us. Yes, always.
And ladies and gentlemen, please stay to meet our candidates and moderators. And one more big round of applause for both of the moderators, both of our candidates, all the other candidates. They did a great job, didn't they? Our bar is open, our restaurant is cooking, and the theater will remain open for your enjoyment. Please stick around and enjoy.